talk about quadrilaterals, and I've included a sheet on Classroom that has a summary of all of these, and you can print this out or just look at it on there. I'm just going to show it to you here. First of all, a quadrilateral, quad means four, so quadrilateral just literally means a convex polygon with four equal sides. And then it divides up from there the different kinds of polygons. We got three different kinds, main groups. We got what's called a parallelogram, a kite, and a trapezoid. Each one of them are special in their own way. We'll start with a kite because that's the simplest of them, really. A kite, we know what a kite is. You've flown one out, run around in the wind. It has no pair of parallel sides. That's what a kite is. It also, these are the properties of it. It has two pairs of adjacent sides. Those are the sides right next to each other, connected to a single point, are congruent. So one pair is congruent, and then the diagonals are perpendicular. So an example of a kite would be something where these two segments are congruent, and then these two segments are congruent. And if you draw the diagonals to them, they're perpendicular to each other. That's what a kite is. A trapezoid has one pair of parallel sides. And we'll look at all of the details of that from there. But you can tell a trapezoid in the fact that it only has one pair of parallel sides. And then a parallelogram has two pairs of parallel sides. So for instance, an example would be if I had something like this, where this is parallel to this, and this line is parallel to this side. So opposite sides are parallel. Those are parallelograms. And then we can look at the different things from there. Parallelograms are divided into separate parts beyond that as well. If you take all of these properties of a parallelogram and give it four right angles, the diagonals are congruent then, and that's called a rectangle. So if you have a parallelogram that has four right angles, so this side's parallel to this one and this side's parallel to that one, but it has four right angles, and the diagonals of it, these two lines, are congruent to each other. A rhombus is a parallelogram that has all four sides congruent. So rhombus is not only these are parallel and these are parallel, but these two sides are congruent and these two sides are congruent. That's called a rhombus. And then kind of if you put these two things together, it gives you a square, and a square has all of these properties up above. It's a parallelogram, so that this is parallel to this and this is parallel to that. This side's congruent to this side, congruent to this side, congruent to that side. That's a square because that's a rhombus, and they're all right angles. That's a rectangle. And the diagonals are congruent and all that other information. Today we're just going to be looking at identifying what type of a quadrilateral we have and state all of the possible names. And we'll come back to this sheet here in a bit. So let's just look at some examples here. We look at number 2 here. So I know that it's got right angles, and I know that this side's congruent to that one and this side's congruent to that one. So if I want the most specific name for that figure, I know that these lines are parallel because they're right angles. And so if I go back to this sheet, I know it's a parallelogram, and the question is, the most specific, I'm going to start down here as a square. A square has to have four right angles. Well, that has four right angles. A square also has to have all four sides congruent. This one, not all four sides are congruent. So you just work your way up from here. It's not a square. it is a rhombus, but the diagonals are not perpendicular. It has 4 right angles, so that makes that be a rectangle. And it's just a matter of checking on here when it asks the most specific name. You want to go as far down on this chart as you possibly can until you find something that doesn't have that property. This one, all 4 sides are equal and 4 right angles, so that makes that one be a square. Down below here, we got some problems that ask you to state all the possible names. So this one's not a square because all 4 sides aren't equal. It's got 4 right angles. That makes that be a rectangle, which means a rectangle, if you go back here, there's the most specific name, and you just go back up, and it's a parallelogram. And it's a quadrilateral. We look at this example, number 8 down here. Don't know anything about it. I don't even have any parallel sides. So that one's the most the possible names that there are. That's just a quadrilateral. Okay. If we were to look at a couple more examples of that, now we're going to look at it with some numbers. Zoom in on this a little. We look at number 12. All 4 sides are equal. It's got 4 right angles. That means that's a square. If we look at let's see, let's look at number 20 down here. We can see that these 2 sides are congruent and these 2 sides are congruent. Opposite angles are congruent, and so if you go back and you look, opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent. That means that that's a parallelogram. So it's a parallelogram and a quadrilateral. And that's what your assignment today is. It's just naming the different types of quadrilaterals.